Hey guys, so this is going to be the first draft review of the 2024 season. The LEC is the first league to really start things off with the competitive scene, and it's super exciting to kind of take a look and understand and calibrate to what pro teams are playing in terms of what they're prioritizing in draft, how they're playing around the new dynamic around season 14. So I'm looking at things like the self-sufficiency of laners because there's going to be less viability of jungle interference sometimes, their ability to contribute to a lot of objectives on the map right now, like the Void Grubs, increased dragons, the pressure of Baron and how it's like not that easy to kill anymore, and how this kind of all ties into what champions are good, especially with the main things being the item changes right now and some items not being balanced yet, as well as new builds that teams are cooking up as a result, right? So in this game with BDS versus G2, I think it's a good example of teams are experimenting with different priorities right now because it's kind of like an unknown field and people are scrimming and thinking different things are good. But also there are some draft fundamentals that still apply. Like some things are never going to change in terms of, hey, we can counter your comp and we can kind of answer what you guys have, and then we are able to get on top of that. And that's kind of the result of this draft here. And this is why G2 has a really good understanding of that. That's a good baseline. And sometimes teams are just not gonna let that up, and they're gonna have a right. If you have that really good philosophy, like you're gonna still be able to thrive regardless of patch, right? So that's the idea here. In this game, there's a lot of priority on different things. I've heard Rumble is extremely strong in this patch, both top and actually potentially jungle. It's surprisingly high win rate. It could be due to the items being really good on him. He can go Liandry's and Riftmaker and Zhonya's and like just so many items that he can go now because they increase his accessibility. So there's a lot of priority picks that BDS have gone for specifically. I've heard Kalista's very strong, and with her bad matchups being eliminated by G2, I'm not sure if G2 actually wanted them to go for the Kalista opener here, so it's pretty good. The biggest thing to take a note here is the directional information. So from the very beginning, right, I've learned that Nocturne is pretty strong on this patch just due to his ability to fulfill the needs of a jungler in season 14. So successful junglers right now are able to thrive in all of the fights that are happening because there's so much fighting, as well as being able to have a lot of tempo to clear. And a lot of the best champions in Season 14 are able to do both. Nocturne is a champion that is somewhat able to do both because he doesn't need the lockdown per se, because he just needs the damage in order to put pressure on and prevent teams from contesting objectives. And that's what he's able to do. He's also excellent at dealing grubs because of his passive. That's something very specific that he can do. Champions like Akali have come back in the meta as well. I believe it might be due to Storm Surge specifically. But the big thing here is that in response to Kalista B1, G2 already have some picks planned. So they hedge the Neeko, just they might prioritize pushing top jungle back a bit, and they want to pick other things, right? So that's probably a plan for them, and Caps is willing to lose resources for that. Aphelios is also a decent matchup in terms of just neutralizing a lot of lanes, right? He's got good range. He can not worry too much about what Kalista has to offer. Then, in response to the B2, B3 Akali Nocturne, you can kind of already tell that BDS is playing very forward here. And that's usually revealing the way your team's gonna play out these fights and just overall flow is usually a bad thing, because that means that G2 has R3, R4, and R5 remaining to just completely shut down this comp. Like there's not much flexibility left in this comp already, which is usually something you don't want to do when you're drafting. In addition, G2 can simply ban out the things that will give their win con the hardest time, right? I've identified they just have to prevent the engage because this is all this comp can do already. So if they just draft champions that have decent matchups and can handle what BDS or how BDS wants to play these fights, it doesn't matter what patch this is on. That's just how drafting is, right? And you're supposed to still hold and push back your revealing cards as much as possible. That should never change, in my opinion, unless the champion is so absurdly broken that it doesn't matter. But I still don't think we're in a meta where that's the case. I could be wrong, but I think there's answers to these things that G2 have been providing, and I don't think they're not viable. And for that reason, I think this is where, even from this R3 phase, G2 is already in a decent advantage, right? They go for the Vi here in response. It's not bad because it locks down these very... Think of it this way. It's not an offensive pick. It helps lock down without aiming, if that makes sense. The BDS team has so much mobility and like these little rat champions. But Vi does not care about that. She can lock down targets without aiming and just has a secured lockdown and be able to stop. It's like a anti-CC in the sense of engaging when they engage in that sense, right? BDS go for a Renekton B5, which is nothing special, but they have the blind, and then G2 go for the soft counter in Gwen. So basically, if you just look at these 5 champs on both sides, it doesn't matter if it's 14.1 or not. It's really good directionally in the way G2 wants to play this, right? Neeko, one of the best mid laners actually right now to provide peel for her team because her ulti can be used defensively and create a ton of space for Aphelios, right? The way for G2, this fight is extremely easy, or playing them out is extremely easy, is just because Aphelios is one of the best AD carries that both front to back and also neutralize engage. Renata is arguably one of the best supports that's an enchanter to neutralize engage because of her W. Like there's so much ability for G2 to just handle everything here. They may have like a rough matchup on bot side, but Aphelios is pretty good at neutralizing in the way he trades, thanks to things like Severum and the range advantage that he has. And it's just a lot easier for G2 to play this game. They simply just don't have to mess up. All the onus is on BDS. And the thing to keep in mind as well is like teams are still calibrating a lot, right? BDS, it's possible that BDS didn't want the draft to play out this way because they just got the picks that they wanted in terms of priority picks, but then they realized they had to build a comp around it afterwards. So that is something to keep in mind. But if you look across the board, you know, it's very easy for Yike to just, you know, play slow, neutralize, make sure their team scales well, and it's all on BDS to really perform. They have the onus here. The key here is that BDS does have a lot of agency to get things across the map, but when it comes to if they don't blow the game open by the time team fights happen, it's going to be really hard in the mid game to continue to secure objectives, because these are all champions that need tempo first in order to thrive, and then they can carry it home after by getting a lead. But G2's comp is just designed to neutralize in general and really not give them a lead. So that's where the problem lies. And that's why it's so easy for G2 to kind of just do nothing in this game. You know, they're not pressured to do much. They still can because their matchups are actually good. That's the sad part. They somehow have good matchups even though, quote unquote, BDS got all the picks they wanted, right? It's just that BDS have to make sure the conditions are right for every fight. And the onus is on them to perform. And they have to be that much better than G2 at making these plays in order to do so. And you can see here that they're trying, right? They're forcing things, they're on, you know, they're getting all over the place, but, you know, and Nocturne's on grubs. Like, but the thing is, it's hard to really do much about that. And, you know, G2 can't really, I mean, BDS can't really push lead as much as they wanted to, or it didn't play out as much as they wanted to. So, although they try their best, I think it was just a little bit too easy for G2 to kind of neutralize the game here, and that is how this draft played out. Hopefully this thing makes sense to you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.